Today is Rosh Chodesh Kislev, and we have, by popular demand, we brought back Rabbi Shmuly Botnick to give us some incredible wisdom and insight into this month, the secrets behind it. Now, last month, we recorded a podcast on this subject as well, in Rosh Chodesh Cheshvan. Last month, I didn't have the notes. I was kind of flying blind. But this morning, Rabbi Botnick sent me the outline of this shiur, of this lecture, and it's absolutely exquisite. And I think, he set a really high bar for yourself last month. Not only did you meet that, I think you exceeded it greatly. So we're really honored to have you over here on the podcast for the month of Kislev. Thank you so much, Rabbi Botnick.
Thank you, Rabbi Wilby. Always a pleasure to be here. All right, so let's jump right into it. So, again, you mentioned Cheshvan. I seem to recall that we focused on the zodiac sign of Cheshvan a month ago, and that was the scorpion, right? So we took a deep dive into what the scorpion represents and how it relates to the inner meaning of Cheshvan. So I would like to follow a similar model for Kislev. The zodiac sign for Kislev we are taught, is the Keshes, the rainbow. All right. Now, we all know about the rainbow. It appears in Parshas Noach at the end, and it doesn't ever really reappear. So the question is, what exactly does the Keshes, the rainbow, represent, and how does that relate to Kislev? All right, fair enough?
Question number one, I got it.
All right, but we're going to add another component to this shiur, which we didn't do a month ago, and that is we're going to discuss the shevet, the tribe that corresponds with the month of Kislev. So there are 12 months in the year, and there are 12 tribes. And we are taught that each month has its own tribe. So there are actually different ways of calculating it. The most simple way to calculate it would be in sequential order, meaning Nisan is the first month, so that would be Ruvain, and then Iyar would be Shimon, and so on and so forth. And I think there are those who use that system, but the Arizal uses a different way of calculating it. And based on the Arizal's calculation, the month of Kislev will fall out on the shevet of Binyamin. So it will be Binyamin, the last shevet, the youngest of the 12 brothers. That is the month of Kislev. And so, in addition to understanding Kislev's connection with the rainbow, we are also going to try to understand Kislev's connection with Binyamin, with the youngest of the 12 sons of Yaakov.
So Jacob has 12 sons. Each one corresponds to a month. The month that we're currently beginning right now, Kislev, corresponds to Benjamin. What's the connection between this month and Benjamin, and this month and the rainbow? Okay, 2 questions.
Yeah. Now, before I have a bunch of other questions too, but before we get to those, it's just to point out an uncanny thing. So we know that Kislev obviously has a very prominent Yom Tov, that's Chanukah, and Chanukah is the celebration of our victory against the Greeks, the Yavanim. Now we find that the Yavanim are also associated with the Keshes. So there's actually a few sources for this. I'm going to quote one, and that is the Medrash Rabbah in this week's Parsha. We're currently holding in Parshas Toldos. In this week's Parsha, we are told that Yitzchak directs his son Esav to go get him, to go hunt for him, right, and bring him some food. And the way the pasuk structures it, it says, Sana kelecha, you should get your kelim. Telyacha, what does telyacha mean exactly? Also some sort of weapon. And kashtecha, and your bow. And the Medrash makes a drasha on each one of these, each one of these words. They say kelecha is referring to Bavel, which is the first of the 4 exiles. Then telyacha is Madai, the second of the 4 exiles, and kashtecha, your bow, is Yavon, the third of the 4 exiles. So here you have it, that the Keshes is correlated to Yavon. Now, granted, the Keshes here and the Keshes we're referring to earlier are different because the Keshes, that's the zodiac sign of Kislev, is the rainbow, and this is referring to the bow and arrow, like the weapon. But it's clear that they're connected with each other. Like every time you find a similarity in Hebrew words, they're always connected. So we're already starting to see that there's some depth going on here. On the one hand, Keshes symbolizes Kislev. On the other hand, it symbolizes Yavon. And we know that Yavon obviously plays a very big role in the story of Kislev. So I'm just pointing that out. Is the
word
clear?
Keshes is a homonym. It's a word that has two different meanings. It means a rainbow and a bow and arrow. So we're using them interchangeably. And they correspond to the month of Kislev, which is the month in which the Chanukah story happened, when we triumphed over the Greeks. And the Greeks, too, in the story of Isaac telling Esau to go capture some game, he lays out some of the weapons, and the Midrash tells us that those weapons correspond to the various different arch foes that our people have faced. And the word Keshes, which means both rainbow and bow and arrow, and that's the weapon that he's telling Esau to take, that corresponds to Yavon, to the Greeks, i.e. the nation that we triumphed over on Chanukah.
That is correct. Now, another thing I want to focus on is every month has its own permutation of Hashem's four-letter name. So Hashem's four-letter name, which we do not pronounce, is Yod Hey Vav Hey. But you can rearrange that into 12 different ways. So it could be Vav Yod Hey Hey, Yod Vav Hey Hey, Hey Hey, Yod Vav, so on and so forth. And each one of the 12 months has its own, and the formula that formulates the four-letter word for that month is kind of the spiritual energy of that month. Does that make sense? I know that sounds confusing.
Yeah, so we have four letters that are the letters that make up the name of Hashem, the name of God that we don't pronounce, and the ineffable name of God. And those four letters can be arranged in 12 different ways. Take those four letters and arrange them in 12 different ways. And each one of those 12 words are also a version of this word, the name of God. And every month has its own formulation, own layout of these four letters to make the name of God. Is that right?
That's right. And it's very clearly outlined for us which formula will correlate with which month. So for the month of Kislev, it will be Vav Yod Hey Hey. Okay, Vav Yod Hey Hey, that's our month. And says the Arizal, it comes from a specific pasuk. This Vav Yod Hey Hey will appear in a pasuk all the way at the end of Chumash Bereshis, where it says when the 12 tribes, 12 sons of Yaakov are burying their father, they're bringing their father to burial, right? Remember, Yaakov died in Mitzrayim, and so they carried him all the way to the Ma'aras HaMachpelah in Hebron, and they're about to bury him, and it says, Vayar Yoshev Ha'aretz HaKnani, that those who dwelled in Eretz Canaan, they observed what was going on. And the Arizal says that's where you see a hint to the name of God that will correlate to the month of Kislev, because the first letter of each word, Vayar Yoshev Ha'aretz HaKnani, it spells out Vav Yod Hey Hey, which again, that is the combination that is connected with the month of Kislev. So, super cryptic stuff going on here. Somehow, in the burial of Yaakov lies the secret of the month of Kislev. All right, does that sound cool?
The end of Genesis tells us the story of the burial of Jacob. He dies in Egypt. They transfer him after some time to the land of Canaan, and it's a very long procession. And Joseph has to lobby Pharaoh to allow him to leave. And then it says a verse, Vayar Yoshev Ha'aretz HaKanani, and they saw those who dwelled in the Canaanite lands, and the first letter of each of those four successive words spell out the Vav, and then the Yud, and then the Hey Hey, which that's the combination of the ineffable name of God that corresponds to our month. Somehow our month relates to the burial of Jacob at the end of Genesis.
That's right. Now, the Sefer Bnei Yissaschar offers a very a very beautiful insight into what that connection might be. He points out, this is mathematical, he says that there's this tradition that Yaakov passed away on Sukkos. That tradition is based on the lashon of a pasuk. It says I think it's in Vayishlach, it says V'Yaakov nasa Sukkosa, which means that Yaakov traveled to Sukkos. Over there it's referring to a city by the name of Sukkos. But there's a tradition that means, it's alluding to the fact that Yaakov actually passed away on Sukkos. Now, the verse tells us in the end of Genesis that it took 70 days to travel from Mitzrayim all the way to Hebron, all the way to bury Yaakov. So, if you count 70 days from Sukkos till, you just count 70 days, you're going to land on Chanukah, right? In other words, if you start on the 15th day of Tishrei, that's Sukkos, and you count 70, you're going to land on the 25th day of Kislev, which is obviously the first day of Chanukah. So, very fascinating. We find that, according to this calculation, Yaakov was being buried on the first day of Chanukah. Hence, we find an allusion to the month of Kislev in his burial.
Beautiful.
So it is beautiful, but it doesn't give us a why. I mean, it gives us a what, like, oh, that's the connection, but why? In other words, we still have to understand why is it that in the burial of Yaakov, there's some sort of connection to Chanukah. Meaning, obviously, it was divinely orchestrated that Yaakov should be buried on Chanukah. Why? Why is that? Now, another thing that I noticed is that I found another instance where you'll find this exact same formula of the Shem Havaya, this Vav Yud Hey Hey. And it's the first 4 letters of last week's Parsha. So last week we read Parshas Chaye Sarah, and the Parsha starts off with the words Vayiyu Chaye Sarah Mea. And it hit me that the last 4 letters of those 4 words is Vav Yud Hey Hey. Now the reason why that struck me as being interesting is because we also blessed the new month last week, right? We made the Berachas Rosh Chodesh. We said the Yehi Ratzon, ushering in the month of Kislev. And I thought about it, and I think, I don't know for sure, but I think it will turn out that way probably every single year. That the Parsha of Chaye Sarah will be the week directly prior to Kislev. So here we have it, that the Shabbos preceding Kislev begins with the same 4-letter formula that is connected to Kislev. And that's just really cool. I thought about it a little more, and I realized that it's even cooler, because one of the main functions of the Parsha, the main subjects of Parshas Chaye Sarah, is all about buying, Avraham Avinu buying the Ma'ar Machpelah, and then subsequently burying Sarah there. So again, we're finding that this 4-letter combination of Hashem's name, which is connected to Kislev, also seems to be inextricably connected to the Ma'ar Machpelah, the tomb in which the patriarchs are buried. Okay, so that's kind of all just my own projection. I might be totally off here. But one thing's for sure is that at the end of Vayechi, that's what the Arizal is telling us, is that the name of Kislev appears in the burial of Yaakov, and I believe that it appears in the burial of Sarah as well.
So we have a reinforcement of this idea that somehow the name of God that corresponds to Kislev, which corresponds to Chanukah, it relates both to the burial of Jacob in this same cave of the patriarchs and the burial of Sarah, who was buried in the same location in the cave of the patriarchs and the matriarchs in Hebron.
That's right. Okay, so far we have the zodiac sign is the Keshes, we have the tribe, that's Binyamin, and we have the 4-letter formula, and that is Vav Yud Hey Hey, somehow connected to Hebron. And we're going to have to try and decipher all of this. Before we get to that, I just want to make 3 short points, just three more questions, and that is as follows. We find in the Arizal, I wish I could have found you the exact chapter and verse. I didn't have time for that, but I've definitely seen it quoted many times. And that is that he says that something very mystical. He says when the angel of Esav fought with Yaakov, right? That's all the way in Parshas Vayishlach. It's coming up. So there's this epic battle between the evil angel of Esav against Yaakov. Yaakov is ultimately victorious, but the angel of Esav does manage to cause some harm by hitting Yaakov in the thigh. What's it called, Rabbi? The sciatic nerve?
The sciatic nerve, yes.
Yeah. And because of that, we are prohibited from eating the sciatic nerve of an animal, right? That's called the Gid Hanasha. So Yaakov is hurt. Yaakov he's injured by the angel of Esav. And the Rizal teaches us something very mystical. He says this injury isn't just physical, it's spiritual as well. There's some sort of spiritual deficiency resulting from that blow. He says that Chanukah comes along and Chanukah fixes it. Chanukah serves as a tikkun for the harm done by Esav back during that fight, that battle. All right, now it's super mystical. There's a lot written up about this, and as part of our share today, as part of the ideas I would like to share, I think we could come to some sort of understanding. Now, another thing that I found, and this was in the Sefer Imrei Noam, is that Chanukah also serves as a spiritual atonement or a tikkun of sorts to a different spiritual disaster, so to speak, and that was the selling of Yosef. So the selling of Yosef is one of the most complex stories in all of the Torah. The brothers, 10 out of the 12 sons of Yaakov are involved in the selling of Yosef down to Mitzrayim, and that obviously results in a lot of very difficult and challenging episodes. There's the whole, they have to go down there, and Yosef is the king, and then he schleps Binyamin, and then Yaakov comes down, and ultimately the Galus Mitzrayim results from that. And somehow Chanukah serves as a tikkun for what went wrong there. Rabbi Wolbe, any comments?
Yes, so we see a lot of different elements here that are coalescing around Chanukah and around the month that we're currently in. It relates somehow to what happened with Jacob and Esav, and Esav's angel, and they had the whole struggle overnight, and he struck him in his thigh, in the sciatic nerve, and the damage, the spiritual damage that was brought about by that is somehow remedied, is rectified on Chanukah. And in addition, the episode of the sale of Joseph, somehow that too is mended and rectified by Chanukah.
Correct. Now, one last thing before we jump into the answer part of all this, and that is that we find in the story of Chanukah a particular emphasis on the Heichal. The Heichal is not the innermost, but because the innermost part of the Beis Mikdash is the Kodesh HaKodashim, but right before that is the Heichal. And
is that the sanctuary? They call it the sanctuary?
Yeah, that would be the sanctuary where the menorah is there, and the Mizbeach is there, and the Shulchan is there. And we find it specifically the Heichal that the Yevanim attack. They enter the Heichal, they violate all of the oil there, and that's really the whole story, because they weren't able to find any pure oil, and it took them 8 days to get it, and that's why they had that 8-day miracle. But what is it about the Heichal, what is it specifically about the Heichal that the Yevanim do not like? Like, why couldn't they attack some other part of the Beis HaMikdash? So I think we'll be able to address that as well. So those are our questions. I didn't count them, but there's probably about 5 or 6 of them.
We have the tribe of Benjamin. I'll go through them. I have them written down here. The tribe of Benjamin, and somehow that relates to this month. The rainbow is this month, and that's also the force, so to speak, of the Yevanim, of the Greeks. It's also this month. We have the burial place of both Jacob and Sarah. It's either happens in this month, and it is featured. The name of God is featured in that context. The name of God corresponding to this month is featured in that context. We have the sciatic nerve, the sale of Joseph, and the particular area of the temple called the Heichal, the sanctuary. All those are related to this month, and of course to Chanukah. And it's a whole big mystery. Please resolve it for us, Rabbi Botnick.
I'm going to do my best. Okay, so let's start with Binyamin and the Keshes. So what we're going to do here is, rather than try and understand each one independently, what I'd like to demonstrate is that the Binyamin, the tribe Binyamin, and the Keshes, they themselves are inherently connected. So it makes our job easier, because we just have to once we connect Binyamin and the Keshes, We just have to understand one idea instead of two, because we'll see that they're really one and the same. So it's really fascinating. You don't have to look too far. There's a pasuk in Divrei Hayamim. This is in the 10th chapter of Divrei Hayamim. There's a pasuk that says they're fighting with Shaul. Shaul is the king that preceded David HaMelech, and he's from the tribe of Binyamin. And it says they're fighting with him, and they start shooting arrows at him with a bow. Vayimtza'uhu hamorim bakoshes. And Rashi points out that there is a great irony in that. He says, because kiheim b'kiyim bakeshes. Rashi says Binyamin were experts at the bow. And he goes on to list like 3 or 4 verses that all demonstrate that Binyamin were like super skilled. The tribe of Binyamin were super skilled at using the bow.
Archers.
All right, I don't know all these verses by heart, but he lists them, Rashi, and they're in Divrei Hayamim. So here you have, it's like you can't get clearer than this, that Binyamin and the Keshes are just like one and the same. And again, this Keshes is referring to the bow and arrow, but we are going to assume that the Keshes, which is the weapon, is the same as the Keshes, which is the rainbow, because you can always assume that when there's a similarity in words, and here it's the exact same word, in Hebrew it means that there is an inherent similarity, an inherent connection.
Yes.
So far, so good?
Fantastic.
Okay. But to understand the connection on a deeper level, the Arizal in Parshas V'Yishlach tells us that when Rachel died, right? Rachel died a very tragic death. Rachel is the mother of Binyamin. She has only 2 children, right? She has Yosef, and now she wants to have one more son, and that would complete the entire structure of the 12 Shvatim. And so she has this 12th child, but she never really gets to have any sort of relationship with him because he dies. He's born while she dies. Her death and his birth are simultaneous with each other. And the term that the pasuk uses is a vatikash belidita, and she hardened in her birth. Rabbi Wolbe, how would you translate vatikash in that context?
I would say that like kashef. It was difficult. It was problematic.
So the Arizal says like this. He says no. Ki bekeshes zer ampen yesh gimel gavnin. There are 3 colors in the rainbow, meaning there's 3 primary colors. I'm not going to read all of the Kabbalistic terminology. And he says, Shehu Binyamin HaTzadik. And this is Binyamin. And that's what it means that Rachel got hardened during the birth. Besod HaKeshes Hazeh. That is the secret of the Keshes, meaning the word Tekash is the same letters as Keshes. Taf, Kuf, Shin, and then just switch it to Kuf, Shin, Taf. So here he's saying even more explicitly, Binyamin is the Keshes. Okay, and he is the Keshes, and where did it come from? It came from Rachel, and I think I saw this, maybe it was in the Arizal, I didn't put that into my notes, but basically the way it worked is that really Rachel had this Keshes, and then when she gave birth to Binyamin, she gave it over to Binyamin, and then she died. Because like the Keshes was her entire essence. And then it became Binyamin's entire essence. And when she handed it over to Binyamin, she died and he was born. So here we have that Binyamin and the Keshes are really very much one and the same. And now we're just going to have to figure out what this is all about.
So Benjamin corresponds to the rainbow or the bow, which we're using them interchangeably. They were expert archers, but somehow they were overcome by archers. And this originates in Rachel when she was giving birth to Benjamin. It was Vatakesh Belita Oso. She was having a difficulty in his birth, and she ultimately died. But the words Vatakesh is the same letters as Keshes, and somehow that was bequeathed to Benjamin.
That's right. So what we have to really figure out here is what's this Keshes, and how is it Binyamin, and how is it Rachel? So I found a line in the Megala Amukos in Parshas Pinchas. I seem to recall seeing it in the Megala Amukos elsewhere as well. Okay? And that is, he says, these 3 colors, right? Remember, the Arizal used that term. These 3 colors, he said, if I go back, he says, these 3 colors are the 3 chasadim, and that is somehow Binyamin. So he says what these 3 colors are, they are the 3 patriarchs. They are the 3 avos. So Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov they are the three primary colors that make up for the keshes. Okay, so we're getting somewhere here. This keshes we've been talking about all this time is actually something very deep and very familiar to us. It is the three patriarchs. It's a combination of all three together make up for the keshes. But what we now know is that there is a unique connection between the three avos and Rachel. Now remember, Rachel is really the youngest of all of the four matriarchs. Obviously, they all had some sort of connection to the three patriarchs, in being that they were married to them. But it seems like Rachel, there's something special, right? Rachel somehow manages to encompass all three avos in one fell swoop. She is the holder of the keshes, and then she bequeaths it to Binyamin. Now, this idea I've actually seen before, even before I learned anything about the keshes, and that is because if you look at the month of Iyar, hopefully we'll still be doing these shiurim in the month of Iyar, the Sfarim tell us that the word Iyar, Aleph, Yod, Yod, Reish, is the Rashi Tevos for Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Rachel. Okay, very interesting. So there's a month that's actually called, so Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, frequently will go together. Rarely do we see Rachel thrown into the mix. But here in the month of Iyar, we see her thrown in together with Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov. It sounds almost as if it's like a continuum. She's part of the team, which is fascinating. And I was thinking that, why would it be in the month of Iyar? So this isn't an Iyar share, but just very quickly, the Ramban in the beginning, in his introduction to Parsha Shemos, tells us that the journey from Mitzrayim to Har Sinai was a journey of returning back to the Avos, in a sense. He says when we left Mitzrayim, when we got Matan Torah, and then we built the Mishkan, we were shavu l'malas avosam. We reached the spiritual level of our forefathers, of Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov. So if Rachel has this keshes, if Rachel somehow has this ability to connect to the Avos, it makes sense that the month of Iyar should be her month, because that's the connecting month, right? So we leave Mitzrayim in Nisan, we arrive at Matan Torah in Sivan. The month in between, the traveling in between, is taking place on Iyar. So what I would guess is the reason why Rachel is involved here is because Rachel has this power to connect people, or to connect her children with the Avos. And that is what is going on. That's the focus of Iyar, which is why Iyar is Vashtes Avram Yisrael Yaakov Rachel. Anyways, we're not talking about Iyar now, but I'm just trying to demonstrate this point, how you actually see that this is a real thing, that Rachel really is somehow a continuum, maybe like a bridge or a go-between the three Avos and all of Klal Yisrael who descend from them. So far, so good?
Absolutely exquisite. I love it. So, Keshes, the three colors, the three shades, the three hues of the rainbow, that's Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and somehow that went to Benjamin via Rachel, and it's demonstrated elsewhere in our philosophy that she serves as the connection between the Jewish people and the patriarchs via Benjamin.
Correct. Here's my next question. And that is either how or why did that happen? In other words, why is Rachel the one who's chosen to be somehow on an equal footing with the Avos? Right? It seems pretty random. Why would she be over Sarah, or Rivka, or Leah? So I tried to look into it. I actually didn't find anything. I have my own theory, and that is based on two different midrashim, which are almost next door neighbors with each other. They're like two paragraphs apart, and I found them in Parshas Vayetze. The first one is that the Medrash Rabbah in Parshas Vayetze, I think it's in chapter 73 of Medrash Rabbah, it quotes a verse in Tehillim. It says, Zocher chasto ve'emunaso leveis Yisrael. Hashem remembered his chesed and his faith for the house of Israel. And it says, Zocher chasto, says the Medrash, ze Avraham. That's referring to Avraham. Okay, he remembered his chesed, that's Avraham. Ve'emunaso, ze Yaakov. Okay, so it skips Yitzchak, and I saw all the commentary are bothered by why it's skipping Yitzchak, but That's not our topic right now. So it skips Yitzchak, it goes to Yaakov. And Manasseh was a Yaakov. Okay. The base Yisrael, it says, who's that? Rachel. Okay, so here I'm seeing it again, unless you have a different explanation for it. I seem to be seeing this again. It's like Avraham, okay, skips Yitzchak, don't know why, Yaakov, and Rachel. Hashem remembered all of them. Again, it seems to be that he's lumping them together. Now, just two midrashim down, it says like this: Vayizkar Elokim es Rachel. This is when Rachel was barren for many years, and then finally Hashem hears her tefillos, or Hashem accepts her tefillos, and he grants her, blesses her with a child. So it says Hashem remembered her. So the Medrash says, what did Hashem remember? Ma zechira zachar lo. What did Hashem remember? Shtikasa la'achosa. He remembered Rachel's silence to her sister. Okay, Rabbi Wolbe, do you want to give maybe a quick rundown of what that silence was?
Yes. So Jacob worked for 7 years for the rights to marry Rachel, but he was worried about his wily future father-in-law pulling a fast one, and therefore he gave a special sign to Rachel that she could verify who she is, because he was worried that maybe he would do some sort of chicanery and swap in Leah instead. So he gives her the special passcode, and at the wedding night, indeed, Laban, the father-in-law of Jacob, indeed tries to do some chicanery and supplants Rachel with Leah. But ahead of time, as Rachel's about to see this all unfold, she quickly passes off those passcodes to Leah. And indeed, Leah presents herself as if she was Rachel, maybe even unaware of all the backstory. And Rachel herself, when she sees her husband being taken away, she's silent about it because she doesn't want her sister to be pained.
Exactly. So, right, this is a sacrifice of epic proportion, one that goes down in history of being the ultimate sacrifice in a sense. Because in her mind, she was giving up the opportunity to marry Yaakov forever. She didn't know that ultimately she would be able to marry Yaakov as a second wife. So this shtika is an act of abject heroism, and that is what Hashem remembered, and it was in that merit that she had a child, or had two children. Okay, so what I would like to do, and this is just my own guessing, is that we see that in one measure it says Hashem remembered Rachel, and it says it in the same breath as saying Hashem remembered Yaakov and Avram, and the next measure says Hashem remembered Rachel. Why? In the merit of her shtika. So what I would like to suggest is that this is really one idea, and that it was because of her shtika, okay, because of this sacrifice, that's why she was able to connect with the avos on a higher level than anyone else. Okay? Is that too bold of an assumption, Rabbi Wolbe?
No, but you have to finish off with your point.
I will.
I have your notes here. I know what you have next here.
I have a lot of things that are coming next. Okay, now, you may have noticed by now that the word keshes and the word shosak have the same letters as well. Which is why I really think that this is strong or corroborating evidence that the shasak, the shtika of Rachel, is what allowed her to embody the keshes, which is Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov.
So we have three words with the same letters, just presented differently or scrambled differently. We have Vatakash, she had a difficult time in the birth. We have Keshes, which is the rainbow. And we have Shatak, which is silence. And these are all the same letters, just oriented differently. And that all connects Rachel both to the antecedents of the Jewish people, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and to this whole idea that we're presenting over here, that she is somehow an embodiment or a continuation of the patriarchs, and she's going to give that over to Benjamin, and somehow that's going to connect with the month that we're currently in and with Chanukah.
That's right. Now, I have even more evidence. And that is that, remember we said that when Binyamin was born, Rachel gave him something. She gave him the keshes, and therefore she died. And Binyamin went on to be the man of the keshes, so to speak. But we know, there's another medrash, this one is in the Tanchuma, that there's something else that Rachel gave to Binyamin. So the medrash Tanchuma tells us that Rachel tafsa bishtika. Okay, Rachel, the word tafsa means she grabbed, right? Rachel held on. She
seized.
Rachel seized the shtika, the power of shtika, the power of silence. That's referring to this story with Leah. And then it says, Binyamin binah, her son, also did that. Yodea b'mechiras Yosef. Binyamin knew about the sale of Yosef, and remember, he wasn't involved in the sale of Yosef, so he was innocent. But he knew about it, v'shosek, and he was quiet. So Rachel had the power of shtika, and Binyamin had the power of shtika when it comes to mechiras Yosef. So what it seems like is, Rachel gave the power of shtika over to Binyamin. And according to us, that is not a coincidence, because Rachel gave the keshes to Binyamin. And the keshes is the same thing as the shtika. It's the same letters, and it's the same concept. It's the power of being quiet which allowed Rachel to merit the keshes. So she gave them simultaneously over to Binyamin. Okay. But let's take this a step deeper. How and why is it that Rachel's silence allowed her to have this connection with
Let me interrupt you for a second. What about the stones, the 12 stones of the breastplate?
Right. So the 12 stones of the breastplate, what Rabbi Wolbe is alluding to here is that Binyamin, his is called the Yashve, that's how I pronounce it. I don't know, there's probably other ways to say it, but Yashve is Binyamin's, and the Medrash says, Yesh lo peh v'shosek. The reason why Binyamin's stone on the Kohen Gadol's Choshen, on the breastplate, is called a Yashbe is because he has a mouth, but he keeps it quiet. Yesh peh. Yesh peh, he's got a mouth, but he doesn't use it unless it's necessary to. And that's Binyamin. So Binyamin very much represents the same shtika that his mother does, and according to us, that means he represents the same keshes as his mother does. Okay. So basically, we have this idea that Rachel's silence, when it came to her sister, not speaking up and revealing her father's trick in swapping Leah out for Rachel, that is what allowed her to have this special connection with the Avos. But why? As we know that Midah K'neged Midah, right? Hashem always rewards. The reward Hashem gives is always in line with the act that was done. And how do we see that playing itself out here? And I think it's very obvious and very powerful. And that is when Rachel was quiet, when she said, "Okay, Leah, I will let you become the wife of Yaakov, and I'm going to stand back and not say anything." What she was doing in her mind was she was giving up her connection with the Avos. Right? Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, the three greatest tzaddikim ever, they founded this wonderful entity called Klal Yisrael. And here Rachel was initially granted an opportunity to be a part of that, right? To be a matriarch of this people. And what she was doing was, she was giving it all up. It wasn't just a matter of being quiet. It was being quiet and sacrificing through her silence. She was sacrificing everything. She was sacrificing the ability to be part of the Jewish people, in a sense. She was sacrificing the opportunity to be a part of the legacy of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. So how does Hashem pay her back? Hashem pays her back by giving her an even stronger connection than anyone else. She, and only she, will be the bearer of the keshes. Only she will be the one to possess, so to speak, this power of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov combined. And she then went ahead and gave it to her son, Binyamin. So through her shtika, she got the keshes, and that makes perfect sense. Does it make perfect sense to you, Rabbi Wolbe?
Absolutely does. She, her challenge, when she had to forfeit those passcodes to her sister, she was in effect forfeiting the connection with this illustrious family and dynasty. and that is her merit. And not only she didn't lose that, she ultimately ended up with having that avise, so to speak, on that by getting the keshes, by getting the rainbow.
And she went ahead and gave it to Binyamin. And as the Medrash tells us, Binyamin followed suit. He followed his mother's ways. And he too was quiet. Why? Because he did not reveal to Yaakov anything about the Mechiras Yosef, the selling of Yosef. He kept it a secret. Okay, it sounds nice, but it bothers me a little bit. Just a little bit. And that is that it sounds like the Medrash is putting Rachel's silence together in the same boat. It's considered like the same level of shtika, of sacrifice, Rachel's as Binyamin. So Rachel was silent by not revealing by not revealing to Yaakov what was going on with Leah, thereby giving up her role as Yaakov's wife. And Binyamin was quiet about the Mechiras Yosef. And I personally don't see how the two are comparable. Rachel's silence, as we said, was an enormous sacrifice. And Binyamin, he kept quiet. I don't know why he kept quiet. I mean, he didn't tell his father about Mechiras Yosef. I could think of a few reasons. A, maybe he didn't want to cause his father pain. B, maybe he didn't want his brothers to get mad at him. And probably the most obvious is that the brothers actually placed a cherem. Right, the Medrash tells us the brothers forbade anyone from revealing to Yaakov what happened. So much so, this is extremely difficult to understand. But they even issue this prohibition against Hashem. However you understand that, I never understood that. But somehow, even like Hashem wasn't allowed to reveal to Yaakov what happened with the Mechiras Yosef. So to me, it's kind of obvious that Binyamin wouldn't. And even if he had a temptation to tell his father about Mechiras Yosef, and he restrained from doing so, why is that such a big deal? Why are we comparing it to Rachel's shtika?
Yeah, it seems to be incongruent, right? It's not the same thing. It's not commensurate. She gave up everything. And what did he give up? He didn't seem to have much motivation to anyhow reveal about the sale of Joseph. So how are they the same? How is this, so to speak, a continuation of the legacy of Rachel? She gave up everything with her silence. He didn't give up really much with his silence. Or did he? Or did he?
Exactly. Or did he? So I have this theory that he did. I have this theory that Binyamin's silence about Mechiras Yosef is actually one and the same. It's basically history repeating itself with Rachel. And that is as follows. We have to understand the Mechiras Yosef a little deeper. Now, Mechiras Yosef is, like I said earlier, it's probably one of the deepest, most difficult parashiyos in the Torah, what was going on there. It's kind of unfortunate because we learn it as children, and we just have this like childish perception, and it stays with us for the rest of our lives. But it's so much more than that. And just to give you like a little bit of a brief insight, I saw in the Sefer Imrei Noam, he says that the Mechiras Yosef was a result of the Gid HaNasheh. So remember, let's go back earlier. We mentioned how the angel of Esav hit Yaakov in the thigh, and that caused some sort of spiritual damage. Says the Imrei Noam that spiritual damage is what allowed for Mechiras Yosef to happen. Okay, how do we understand that? So he actually explains it. I'm going to explain it a little bit differently than what he says. The way I understand it is that there's Avram, there's Yitzchak, and then there's Yaakov. But a person's physical body is representative of their spiritual essence. And the way the body is structured is that there's a head, there's two hands, your stomach, the waist, and then the two legs are considered what's called lebar migufa. They're not really a part of the body, they are what carries the body and moves it forward. Yaakov, in terms of himself, he really ends at the waist. Going down, the feet are really his children. They are the Shvatim. What Esav did was he fought with Yaakov. He fought and he fought and he fought, and he ultimately succumbed. He failed. So at the end of the night, after a night's worth of this incredible battle, Esav says, "All right, Yaakov, you got me. I couldn't overcome you, but you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to hit you in your thigh. I'm going to hit you right where your children begin. Meaning I am going to sever the connection between you and your children. So you can remain intact. You can be spiritually intact. but I'm going to make sure it doesn't continue. I am going to harm the continuity of Yaakov Avinu. Because he did that, and because he actually succeeded in causing some sort of spiritual challenge to the continuity of the Jewish people, that is what allowed for Mechiras Yosef to happen. Because Mechiras Yosef, what was really that? I mean, he sold Yosef away, as if to say Yosef is no longer part of us. And the tribes who were guilty of that, also in a sense, the danger is that they could have left the fold of Yaakov, of the legacy of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. And I believe that is why they placed this cherem. They said, right, we mentioned earlier, they prohibited anyone from revealing to Yaakov what happened. Nobody, even Hashem, isn't allowed to tell Yaakov what happened. It's a very hard thing to understand, but the way I would like to suggest is that if Yaakov found out about what happened, then somehow Yaakov would have ostracized the Shvatim from being Shvatim. He would have said, you can no longer be a part of this legacy. And the Shvatim said, we can't have that happen. We want to remain the children of Yaakov. We want to remain a part of the legacy of the Jewish people. And so nobody is allowed to tell Yaakov about the Mechiras Yosef. Because if he does, we're finished. I don't have proof to this. This is my own theory. Now, here's the thing. There is one Shevet who did not participate in Mechiras Yosef. And that Shevet is Binyamin. And that's not a coincidence. It's because Binyamin was the one Shevet who was not alive at the time of the Gid HaNashe. When Esav hit Yaakov, and he said, your children will no longer continue, Binyamin was not born at that point. Just look in the parasha, you'll see he's born later. So he was not part of this injury, of this spiritual challenge that would make it difficult for Yaakov to continue, and that's why Binyamin was not guilty of Mechiras Yosef. So here's the thing. Here's what Binyamin may have been tempted to do. He would have been tempted to approach Yaakov behind his brothers' backs and say, guess what? Guess what, Dad? Here's what happened. They are guilty of Mechiras Yosef. They should be written off. They should be cancelled. And I, and only I, should continue the legacy of the Jewish people. Because I'm not guilty. And I'm really the only son that wasn't a part of the whole Gid HaNashe disaster. So I am the true heir to the throne. I should be Klal Yisrael. So what Binyamin was possibly tempted to do, is exactly what Rachel was tempted to do. Rachel wanted to say, no, Leah, get out of here. I am the one who deserves to be part of the Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov heritage. And she didn't. She allowed Leah to take that role. And here Binyamin is doing the exact same thing. As far as he's concerned, he should really be the only one. The ones who are guilty of Mechiras Yosef should be written off. But he doesn't. And he says, I'm going to keep quiet. And I'm going to let my brothers be part of this. I'm going to allow them to be a part of the continuity of Yaakov, even though there's reason for them not to be. Rabbi Wolbe, do you agree with this? It's kind of a bold theory.
I love it. And in effect, Binyamin could have allowed Esav to triumph. Right? Esav is trying to damage the future continuity of the Jewish people. And to a certain extent, Binyamin could have allowed that to happen by forcing or compelling Yaakov to write off the rest of his siblings, and thus making the Gid HaNashe, that damage to the sciatic nerve, the damage to the continuity of the Jewish people, or the descendants of Jacob who were alive at the time, to make that permanent, and thus he would be the only continuation of the nation, and he would have the entire legacy for himself had he opened his mouth.
That's right. Now we find that Binyamin was zoche to something very special. We find that the Beis HaMikdash, when it was built, it was divided. So we know that all of Eretz Yisrael really was divided amongst the 12 tribes. So who got the Beis HaMikdash? So that too was divided. Yehuda got some of it. Yehuda got actually kind of the lion's share. He got the Harabayas and the Lishkos and the Azaros. But that's only in quantity. In quality, Binyamin actually got the more significant part because he got the Heichal and the Kodesh Kodshim. So the two holiest parts of the Beis HaMikdash went to Binyamin. Now this I did not see, but again I wanted to suggest that we know who sanctified the Har Moriah. Like why is it that the Beis HaMikdash is even built on Har Moriah? So that's very clear in the verses. It's Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Or Avram and Yitzchak through the Akedah, which took place on Har Moriah. Yaakov has this awesome revelation in Parshas Vayetze on the Har Bayis. And it could be, I want to suggest that because Binyamin was quiet, like his mother was, because Binyamin was Shasak, and he married the Kesha, so he married this unique connection with the Avos, and therefore, the Beis HaMikdash, or at least the brunt of the Kedusha of the Beis HaMikdash was in his Chelek. Alright, that's my theory. That's why the Heichal and the Kodesh Kodshim are in Binyamin's portion of Eretz Yisrael.
Perhaps you could also add that wasn't Mishkan Shiloh also in the tribe of Yosef?
Yeah,
Yosef. Maybe Yosef was less culpable. Yosef was less culpable in the sale of Yosef, right?
Right, he's less culpable. I think we find that there is some culpability in the fact that he shouldn't have been telling his father, the things his brothers were doing. I think, in other words, you're right. Yosef was not fully culpable for the selling of himself, but Binyamin was a complete non-party. Like he had absolutely nothing to do with it. But right.
Judah tried to mitigate the effects of the brothers' plans, the brothers' nefarious plans for Yosef, and thus the surrounding area around that little strip that's Benjamin's is also for Judah. Right, the rest of the temple is in the tribe of Judah's.
Exactly, very good point. All right,
because he did attenuate some of the effects of the sale of Joseph.
All right, so let's start wrapping this up. Let's start bringing this all together. The Medrash tells us, Medrash Rabbah in Bereshis, that one of the things that the Yevanim did was the Yevanim mandated that the Jewish people write on the horn of a shor, of an ox, the words, Ein lachem chelek be'elokei Yisrael. You have to take the horn of an ox and write that the Jewish people have no chelek, we have no connection with the God of Israel. Okay, seems like a weird thing to do. So I've seen it quoted that the idea of writing it on the horn of a shor, of an ox, is that they were trying to evoke the Aveira of the Mechiras Yosef. Why? Because Yosef is compared to an ox. The verse is Bechor Shor Hadar Lo. Yosef is somehow compared to an ox, and therefore they said, write on the horn of an ox that you have nothing to do with the God of Israel. Okay, so we actually are in an advantageous position because we understand why they would want to evoke the sale of Yosef. Well, maybe we don't fully understand it yet, but basically, this sale of Yosef we recognize had a very significant spiritual effect in the continuity of the Jewish people. Okay, but what I haven't heard explained is, what is this? We have no connection with the God of Israel. What does that have to do with Mechiras Yosef? And I think now we understand it very clearly, because as we said earlier, the threat that's posed by the selling of Yosef, the damage that could have resulted, if not for our hero Binyamin, is that the Jewish people, 10 out of 12, would have been completely ostracized from the legacy of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. So what the Yevanim were trying to do is they were trying to say, remember the selling of Yosef. Don't forget it. And if you remember it, what's going to happen is that you will no longer have a portion in the God of Israel. Israel is Yaakov, right? Yisrael is Yaakov. Specifically, Elokei Yisrael. That's what the Yevanim were trying to do. Can we
add another point? He was named Israel right after he was struck in the thigh.
Oh, that's an excellent point. I should have thought of it myself.
And thus, only Benjamin would have, so to speak, the relationship with Israel post that point.
Exactly. Rabbi Wilby, I'm very impressed. I'm a little disappointed in myself. But okay, yeah, excellent point. I think that's 100% true. Okay, now, why is it specifically the Yevanim that is launching this campaign? To remember the sale of Yosef, to divorce us from Elokei Yisrael? I mean, why didn't the Babylonians do it? Why didn't the Mitzrim do it? So here's what I think. there's four exiles, right? When we count the 4 exiles, we don't include Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim is considered like the super all-encompassing exile. So the 4 are, there's Bavel. They kicked us out of the first temple. Then we got passed down to Paras Umadai. We lumped those two together. That's the whole Purim story, happens in Madai. Then there's Yavan, that's the 3rd. And then there's Edom, which is that's the ghost that we're currently in. So those 4 correspond to Avram is Bavel, Yitzchak is Paras Madai, Yaakov is Yavan, and then the one we're currently in, I've seen different takes. It's either David HaMelech, which is why David is the Mashiach, or it's Moshe Rabbeinu. Either way, the point is, when we were in Golus Yavan, so the opposing force, so Yavan is on the negative side, on the positive side is Yaakov. Now Yavan knows that there's a war between them and the Jewish people. Whoever wins, if the Jews win, then Yaakov will continue. They'll move on to the next stage. If the Yavanim win, and they manage to completely wipe out the Jewish people, so then that's it. It ends with Yaakov. Which is exactly what the Gid HaNasha was all about. The Gid HaNasha was saying, Yaakov, okay, you're intact, you win, but I do not want you to continue. So the Yavanim, by trying to wipe out the Jewish people, what they were really doing was the exact same thing as Esav trying to hit Yaakov in the sciatic nerve. You're trying to say, you will not continue. You're not going to move on to Golus number 4. We're going to stop you dead in your tracks, and Yaakov will not continue. And that's why they tried to evoke the Mechiras Yosef. Because the Mechiras Yosef, as we said, it's the same thing as the Gid HaNasha. It's the divorce between Avram Yitzchak Yaakov and all subsequent generations. So it's specifically the Yavanim who are trying to make an issue out of Mechiras Yosef because they do not want Avram and Yitzchak and Yaakov to continue. This is why we mentioned earlier the Yavanim are referred to as Keshes. Because what they're trying to do is they are trying to stop the Keshes. Right? They're a Keshes because they're trying to claim the Avos for themselves. They want to say, no, the Avos are not the patriarchs of the Jewish people. Maybe the Avos are the patriarchs of anyone. We want to have a connection to them. We don't want their spiritual prowess, the spiritual significance that they introduce to the world. We don't want that to be unique to the Jewish people. So they're called the Keshes because they're challenging the Keshes of Klal Yisrael. Okay, so why did they fail? Why were they unsuccessful in knocking the Jewish people away from Avram Yitzchak Yaakov? The answer is because of Binyamin. Binyamin kept Mechiras Yosef a secret. Binyamin doesn't allow Mechiras Yosef to be revealed to the extent that the Jewish people will be expelled from Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. The merit of Binyamin continues. In the merit of Binyamin, we can never evoke Mechiras Yosef to the point where it will have that devastating effect. Through Binyamin, the Jewish people will always remain connected to Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov. The damage of the Gid HaNasha will never be complete, and the damage of Mechiras Yosef will never be complete. Rabbi Wolbe, does this make sense?
Yes, they felt like they had 11 out of 12 of the way of the damage done, the damage to the continuity of the patriarchs, and they were going for the final blow, so to speak, or they're trying to. There was one link connecting the nation to their roots, and that is Benjamin, and that he's the stalwart holding up the fort, making sure that the Greeks cannot finish off the nation and their connection to the patriarchs.
So what did the Yavanim do? The Yavanim charged into the Beis HaMikdash and they went straight for the Heichal. They don't care about the rest of the Beis HaMikdash. They don't care about Har HaBayis. Har HaBayis is in Yehuda's Chelik. Yehuda is culpable for Mechiras Yosef. The Lishkos, the Azaros, those are all in Yehuda's Chelik. They don't care about that. They care about the Heichal. Because the Heichal is Binyamin. Now, they want to attack it. They want to destroy it. They want to destroy Binyamin because they know that the secret to the Jewish people's success in this war will be Binyamin. And I have proof to this. I didn't see this anywhere, but I think I have really, really strong proof. Because at the end of Maseches Sukkot, there's a very strange story that's told about a woman by the name of Miriam Bas Bilga. Miriam Bas Bilga was Jewish. She was born to a family of Kohanim. But for whatever reason, she left the fold and she married a Greek. And the Gemara tells us that she entered together with the Yevanim. It's actually Rashi who points out that this is the story, because the Gemara says she entered the Heichal. It doesn't say wedge. So Rashi points out that it's together with the Yevanim in our Chanukah story. And it says she went straight for the Mizbeach. She kicked it and she said, Lucas, Lucas, wolf, wolf. She said, wolf, wolf, why are you devouring the money of the Jewish people? Okay, what a weird thing to do. But I think it's not weird at all. I think it's actually very deep. Because in Parshas Vayechi, as part of when Yaakov is blessing all of his children, Yaakov gives a blessing to each one of his children, a separate blessing. Each one got its own bracha and its own prophecy. And Binyamin is told, Binyamin ze'ev yitzhof, baboker yochalad. Binyamin, you are a wolf, and you will eat in the morning. What does that mean? So the Targum Unkla says, it means referring to the Mizbeach. Because the Mizbeach is in Binyamin's portion, and it eats in the morning. It eats the Tamid Shel Shachar, the sacrifice, the carbon that we bring in the morning. He eats it. It continues the Targum Unkla, Yochal Ad. Ad is referring to the Tamid Shel Bein Arbaim, that he eats in the evening as well. She went straight for the Heichal, straight for the Mizbeach, and she kicks it, and she says, wolf, wolf. She's clearly alluding to Binyamin. She's yelling at Binyamin for being that Ze'eh, for being the Mizbeach, for which the Jewish people are able to bring sacrifices and connect to Hashem. And really, the Tamid Shel Shachar is really very much associated with Avram Avinu as well. Avram Avinu was the one who established the Shachar's prayer, which is associated with the Tamid Shel Shachar. So through Binyamin and through the Mizbeach, we're able to connect with the Avos, we're able to connect with Hashem. And that's what she was trying to attack. I think that's a really cool, it's a cool evidence to this idea that the entering the Heichal was a direct challenge to Binyamin. Okay. Now, in the story of the Mechiras Yosef, when Yaakov sends Yosef down to meet his brothers, which was really the beginning of the end, it says that he sent him from the Emek Chevron. He sent him from the depths of Chevron. Now Rashi asks, the depths of Chevron? Chevron is on a mountain. The depths of Chevron would sound like it's on some sort of valley. So Rashi says, no, the depths of Chevron doesn't mean, geographically. What it means is, from Eitza Amuka shall also hakavor b'Chevron. She sent Yosef, he sent Yosef from the deep Eitza, the deep solution, or I don't know exactly what the word Eitza means in this context, of Avram, who is buried in Hebron. Okay, and from there, the whole story of Mechiras Yosef evolves. Why does it say that? Why does he say it sent him from the solution, or from the Eitza of the one who's buried in Hebron? Why do we care? I think the answer is because the Avos are buried in Hebron. Hebron, today, after the Avos died, Hebron is where all of the Avos, that's where they're found. Until Mashiach comes. That's where the Avos are. Sending Yosef from Hebron means he was sending Yosef away from the Avos. Potentially. There was this danger. He's like, I'm sending you now away from your grandfather Avram, away from your grandfather Yitzchak. I'm sending you away from Hebron into a very murky, mysterious place. You're going to be sold down to Mitzrayim. And there's this fear, there's this potential danger of you disappearing from the face of Jewish history. And that was all part of this Eitza Amuka that Avram received. That Hashem told Avram, Ger Yazaracha, your children will be estranged. That's what it means. Your children will be estranged. They're gonna be estranged from you. They're gonna be distanced, disconnected. But as we discussed, that didn't end up happening. Because through Binyamin, the disconnect never became complete. Even though Mechiras Yosef could have resulted in a complete disconnect from Hebron and the Avos, we remained connected to Hebron and the Avos through Binyamin. Which, by the way, the word Hebron actually means connection. Hebron, it means chibur. The idea of Hebron is it's a place of connection. It's a place to connect with the Avos. But you have to foster that relationship. And through Binyamin, we're able to do that. Now, there's something very interesting. The Mishnah in Yuma says that every morning when they brought the Tamid, so they couldn't bring the Tamid until it was light, until it was daytime. So they would say, Heir pnei kol hamizrach ad shebechevron? Has the light reached Hebron yet? And if they said yes, the light has reached Hebron, so they knew they could bring the carbon. Now, that's very strange. I mean, for it to be morning, the light doesn't need to reach Hebron. It just needs to appear. The sun needs to rise. So even the Yerushalmi says that it was just a way of evoking this chus of Hebron and the Avos. It was a nice way to start the day by mentioning Hebron. But according to us, it's much deeper. Remember, they're bringing a carbon on the Mizbeach of Binyamin. Right? Through Binyamin, we are able to attach ourselves with Hebron, with the Avos. And that's crucial. That's crucial for our whole avodas to be connected with the Avos. So before bringing a carbon, they wanted to know, is it light in Hebron yet? Are we connected with Hebron? Because that's our avoda. That is crucial to our avoda. Let's go back and answer all of our questions. We wanted to know, Kislev is connected with the Keshes and it's connected with Binyamin. Now we understand it. Because the Yavanim were trying to disconnect us. In this month, in Kislev, that's when the whole battle happened. The Yavanim are trying to disconnect us from the Avos. Who saves the day? Binyamin. What does Binyamin allow us to do? Connect with the Avos, to connect with the Keshes. Why is the Shem Havaya of the month of Kislev always found in connection with Hebron, right? We said at the beginning of Chaisar we find it when Avram went to buy the Maris of Machpelah, and we find all the way at the end, the other bookend of the Hebron story, so to speak, is when Yaakov is buried there, right? He's the last one to... Sarah is the first one to be buried there, Yaakov was the last one to be buried there. And again you find that Shem Havaya. According to us, it's so obvious. It's because connecting with Hebron, creating that chibur to Hebron, is what Kislev is all about. Why is Chanukah? Why does the Arizal tell us that Chanukah is a tikkun on the Gid HaNashe? It remedies the harm, the injury dealt to Yaakov's Gid HaNashe. It also remedies the harm and the damage of the Mechiras Yosef. We understand all of that now because the Gid HaNashe and Mechiras Yosef was one and the same. It was all about divorcing the Jewish people from the Avos. And Chanukah heals that. Chanukah mends that tear. Why did the Yavanim specifically attack the Heichal, we ask? Now we understand it. Because the Heichal was in the portion of Binyamin. And they wanted to attack Binyamin because they knew that their success depends on getting rid of Binyamin. And as we know, they failed. And thus we have the Chanukah story. And that is the end of my shir. I hope some of it, at least, was understandable.
This is incredible. And I have some thoughts that I would love to add to this incredible presentation. You know, we talked at the beginning that there's some sort of ambiguity in the word keshes because it does seem to mean two different things, a rainbow and like a bow as in a bow and arrow. So we know the shape of the rainbow and the bow are the same. It's the same kind of semicircle shape. But how does it all connect? I have a theory. So we know that both Ishmael and Esav, which are the other two parts of this family, they're both archers, and there's instances where they appear with the rainbow. We talked about with the bow. I'm sorry. We talked about already Esav when his father sends him, take your bow, and we know that Yishmael a few times mentions that he had a connection with the bow. When he was about to die, his mother went away, bow shots away, and then when he went to Egypt, he was rovet kashas. He was an archer, and that's the word keshes in this context of war and bloodshed. And of course, the keshes, the same word, is also used in the context of peace and of a bris, of a connection between the Almighty and us. So maybe we can suggest, just to kind of bring your point home here, that there's this battle over the keshes. And the keshes is this family, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. There's this incredible family, this incredible power. There's a battle as to what keshes is going to be present here. They're the keshes, for sure. But how is that going to be directed? Is it going to be directed in, so to speak, in militant usages? And that's kind of the way of Esav and Yishmael. and maybe Yavan as well. The Greeks wanted to kind of seize it for that. That would be one way to connect with the Avos. And of course, the way it ended up working, thanks to, of course, Benjamin, it's one of peace. And maybe that's kind of the challenge at hand, is that there's two kesheses, and there's the battle as to which one is going to gain supremacy. And what, if the other sides would have taken it, it would have been a very different keshes. Now, I had another interesting kind of idea here. So several times there was efforts to try to destabilize that. Of course, Lavan wanted to do that. He wanted to destabilize this whole system. And the Gidanasha, the angel of Esav, wanted to do that. And all that played out with the sale of Joseph, and it almost happened there. But of course, it didn't work out. And in the end, Yaakov was spared. Now, didn't he go to Sukkos? Vayavo Yaakov Sukkosa. Isn't that right after the Gidanasha?
Yeah.
That kind of symbolizes that, and he was Shalem, right? Is that the same pasuk? He was Shalem? Yaakov was Shalem?
Sukkosa? I don't know if it's the same pasuk, but it's right
there. So Yaakov was mended. He was healed in Sukkos, and that's when he died, you told me, right? And we know that all the way to the end of Yaakov's life, there was this whole question, does he have any kids that are awry? Is there some sort of leftover of maybe the other sort of keshes present? And then at the very end, on his deathbed, it was mitaso shleimo. His bed was untampered. It was undamaged. Now, here's the point I wanted to add here. The Gemara in Sota says that during this very long funeral procession, there was another attack of Bnei Yishmael, the Ishmaelites, and Bnei Esav. They came to attack the funeral procession. They weren't giving up even at the very end. And then when they saw this incredible honor, and they saw the crown of Yosef on the funeral bier, on the coffin of Jacob, they all took off their crowns and they put it on the coffin of Jacob as well. And the Gemara says, if I'm not mistaken, that there were 36 crowns, which is 12 from Jacob, 12 from Esav, and 12 from Yishmael. So this is the ultimate cementing of the dominance of the keshes of Jacob and the way it ultimately worked out, where they finally acceded, so to speak, to us. They laid down their weapons and they yielded and they submitted, and that's really what happens with the Malach, right? The Malach ultimately accedes to Jacob, to Yaakov, and allows him to assume supremacy. Those were some of my thoughts.
No, it's great, and I would just add that there's 36 lights on Chanukah. Right?
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Oh wow! Yeah. Yes, 36 lights on Chanukah.
I mean, I have crazy thoughts about this. I don't know how far to go, but if you
well, listen, if we're not worried about the podcast, no one's listening anymore. Everyone already turned up, so you could just spitball and speculate. Well, I also have another thought. What about Charbi Ubakashti?
Yeah. So I mean, that's tefillah. So that's referring to tefillah. Rashi says. They both say Rashi and the Talmud. Yes. But
Talusi. Yes. So that's
so tefillah is the avos, right? The avos were masaking tefillah.
That's the keshes, so to speak, that ultimately endured.
Right.
And that's also Shechem, right? That he took Shechem, from which Yosef was sold, right? So that's also a connection.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah.
Right, because he took the city of Shechem, Becharbi Bekashti, right?
Yeah. He took it. It took it with tefillah, which was keshes.
So what's the bottom line for us? They tried to kill us, and we endured. Let's eat like every other festival.
So, I mean, I think there are lessons. There are practical lessons you could take from it. The one, to me, what's very powerful is this idea that Rachel gave up her ability to be part of Isaac Yaakov, and what did she get? She got it stronger than anyone else. I'll tell you another place where you find it. This Reb Chaim Kanievsky points this out. That you remember the story of the Meraglim and Shlach. So they go to Israel and they say, you're not a bad place. What was going on? So I think it's the Zohar that says, and this is a pretty famous idea, that the Meraglim, they were leaders of their people. And somehow they knew that as soon as they enter Israel, they will no longer be leaders. They will not be Nisim. And so they were afraid. They didn't want to lose their position. Now, Reb Chaim Kanievsky asks a question. He says, you find one of the Meraglim was Kalev. He's one who did not sin. And in Parshas Matos, we see that he is one of the leaders of the Jewish people. He is one of the Nisim that will be taking the Jewish people, leading his tribe into Eretz Yisrael. So he says, what's going on? I thought you told me the Meraglim were not allowed to be the leaders once they enter Israel. So it's so beautiful. I mean, the answer is so beautiful. It's just this irony. He says, no, exactly that. By giving it up, that's how you get it. You're right, Kalev gave it up. As far as he was concerned, he was giving up his right to become a Nasi. So he became a Nasi. And they all didn't.
What he thought he was forfeiting, he ended up actually not only losing it, but gaining even more of it.
Exactly. I've told you this before. It will be in the name of the Stipler. And to me, just on a very personal level, how you can implement this idea, which is like he says it in the context of desire, of illicit lust, and he says you want a desire to do something. He writes a havtacha or a bracha. Whatever it is you give up, you will get it back, and you'll get it back in a way that's mutter. So you want to engage in a relationship that will give you passion and love and whatever, and it's wrong. It's illicit, so you give it up. Hashem will bless you with all of that in a way that's mutter. So your marriage will be that much more robust, that much healthier, that much more. I guess the relationship will be that much stronger because
it's like the Gemara of the guy in the tzitzis and the 7-layered bed.
What's the story? Oh, the one where the tzitzis hits him.
The tzitzis hits him, but he ultimately marries that lady.
He marries that woman. Yeah, she's Megayah. That's right. And as you give it up, you get it back. You get it back in a way that's mutter. So to me, that's one lesson you can take from it.
Well, this was exquisite. This was incredible. You raised the bar for learning about the secrets of...
Teves is a hard one.
Teves.
It's a morbid month.
It's a tough month. Well, we have to go through that. There's ups and downs, ebbs and flows in the month. But please God, I hope to do this again next month. Your email address is still botnicksm@gmail.com.
Yeah.
So everyone send your questions to him because my answer is I don't know. It's way too complicated. But this was incredible. I enjoyed this immensely. And I thank you for coming onto the podcast and sharing your incredible wisdom. I call you're the wizard of wisdom, the oracle from Cincinnati. Thank you so much, Rabbi Botnick. If you want to email me for some reason, my address is rabbi@com. And I'm in the Torch Center. You're still in Cincinnati. We did this via the magic of Zoom. And I hope all of y'all enjoyed.